Hello everyone. Hi. I hope you guys can hear me and see the screen. Any questions for me before I get started? Okay. Are you guys lucky to get the able to solve the assignment? Because if you remember in the last session, we were solving the crude operations where I performed only insertion. So do you got time to solve deletion, retrieving a single record and retrieving all the records? Yeah, I have seen the email. I tried to reach Shiva last night. I just saw the email last day, and I mean last day in the sense that is today. And I tried to reach Shiva, but I couldn't trace him out. I couldn't reach him. So probably I try to connect to him today, and I'll see what exactly the problem is. Yeah. There's any question with respect to what we discussed so far? I hope you are all okay with the way the training is happening. Right? Okay. So what I do is I try to solve the complete activity. Right. So in the last class I solved the activity to this extent. When I here we go. There was an insert.html. There was an insert.html. Right. And I'm entering the data here. Look. I'm not opting for the photograph yet. It says Ranga R registered successfully. Now what exactly I'm left with? So what happening here is when you click on the submit button, it connects to a servlet called insert servlet. Now in the insert servlet, what I did, in the insert servlet you have a doGet method. By default it opts for get. I didn't specify the method attribute here. Though I didn't specify the method attribute, the default value is get. The default value of method attribute is get. So in the insert servlet, the doGet method gets invoked, and with the help of request object and get parameter method, I am obtaining the values from the HTML document. Then I am creating a user object with all those values. Then I am also creating a user DAO object, and the user DAO object got an insert method, and this insert method is carrying a user parameter. So when I invoke the insert method, I pass the user object, and it returns me an integer value. If the integer value is not 0, I print a message on the servlet saying that registered successfully. Otherwise, I print a message fails to register. This was something which I solved in the last class. Now then I asked you to work on the deletion part, get all part. Now let me demonstrate the deletion part for you. To delete a record, you just need a unique, or you just need to pass the primary key. Then here for us, the username is the primary key. So entering the username and clicking on the submit button. There is only one input field and you have a submit button. There is only one input field and you have a submit button, and when you click on the submit button, it connects to a servlet called delete servlet. Now in this delete servlet, you are obtaining that one text field value, the username you are obtaining it. Then you create a user DAO object and you call a delete method on it, whereas your delete method is taking what parameter? To delete a record, you just need to know the username. If you look at this, I have written a snippet. The delete method accepts a username as an argument, and your query, and you are executing a record, you are running the execute update method. This is all something we learn in JDBC, Java Database Connectivity. Then I return an integer value saying that the record is inserted or not. And the same case with your rest of the two things. I can test the application. Look at this user DAO. You will see another method called get, and you see another method called getAll. And your getAll method returns an array list because you are trying to get all the user objects. GetAll is what? Get all the user objects. So it is return type is array list. I'm going to run the delete HTML too. Or before I run the delete, let me say get. See here. Get it. Now what are you doing here? On the DAO object, you call the get method, and that get method will return a user object, and you are checking whether the user object is null or not. If it is not null, you print the data of the user. If it is null, you say, hey, no record found with the given username. On the user DAO object, you are calling a get method to get the object. If that object is not null, you print it. If the object is not null, you print it. if it is null, you give a message, hey, no record found with the given username. Same thing you do on a delete servlet. If the status, it returns an integer, the delete method returns an integer. If it is a non-zero integer, you say deleted. If it is a zero, then you say fails to delete. If it is a zero, you say fails to delete. If it is a zero, you say fails to delete. I can test it out here. Let me say delete.html. Record deleted. You see Ranga are deleted. Now I try to go back and get it. I'm trying to obtain the Ranga R. No record found with the given username Ranga R. Now observe the other part, getAll servlet. I call getAll.html when I click on the submit button of the getAll.html and no input value needed for this. And no input value needed for this getAll.html. I have this, all the details. Right. So what did I do here? You have a user DAO object and a user DAO object called the getAll method that returns an array list. If that array list is null, no records found. If it is not null, you are displaying the list of elements using a for each loop. You are displaying the list of elements using a for each loop. Yep. I don't know how many of you have given a try to solve this assignment, but do you find this difficult what I demonstrated now, or in case if you have not done, will you be able to do it, or do you need any help, or you have any questions? Alright, so I hope everybody is good with this. So I would like to discuss one point here. Now what is that? What is that is, if you observe those servlets, if you observe this servlet is not only capturing the servlet is responsible for capturing the input from the HTML. Look at this. It is responsible for capturing the input from the HTML. Right? And then it is creating a user DAO object and invoking the respective method. Then you are comparing the result. If it is not null, you print the result. If it is null, you don't want to print the result. I mean, you have a different message. If it is null, you have a different message. If it is not null, you have a different message. Now if you see, I'm combining both HTML as well as text. So I'm using a BR tag to break the line. I'm using the BR tag to print the message into the next line. But I'm using a very little HTML. I'm using a very little HTML. I'm using a very little HTML. It's here. I'm using a very little HTML in this servlet. If you look at this get all servlet, again I made use of the HTML. Now I want to add more HTML. I want to add more HTML. So my servlet becomes too complicated. My servlet becomes too complicated. My servlet becomes too complicated if I try to add more HTML here. If I try to add more HTML, my servlet becomes complicated here. My servlet becomes complicated. So what I have a solution to this. Guys, observe here carefully. This is something, a design pattern I'm trying to talk about. Same stuff, insert, delete and all the stuff. And again you have a controller package, connection package, DAO package, VTO package. But in addition you have another package called output. In addition you have another package called output, and if you focus carefully here, look what I'm doing inside a get servlet. See, to get a record I need the username. Then I created a user DAO object. I'm obtaining the user object. If it is not null and null. If it is null, you are calling the failure HTML. You are not printing it here. If it is null, you are calling the failure.html. If it is not null, you are calling another servlet called single record servlet. And you are passing some attribute to it. If it is not null, you are setting that user object as an attribute and you are calling a single record servlet. You are calling a single record servlet. In the same way, in the get all also, you are calling something called what? You are not printing. If it is not null, you are not printing. Rather, you are setting it as an attribute and you are calling another servlet. If it is null, you are calling failure.html. Can you people guess what exactly I am trying to do here? How this program is being different from the previous one? And what exactly I am trying to do with this? I know I am not printing the output. I am printing the output in another servlet. I'm printing the output. Look at this. I have two different programs called single record servlet and I have a multi-record servlet. Whereas single record servlet is printing a single record, whereas multi-record servlet is printing a multiple records. But instead of printing the output in the get servlet or instead of printing the output in the get all servlet, why do you think I'm trying to move the output to another servlet? Why do you think I'm moving the output to single record servlet and multi-record servlet which belongs to output package? Why not I'm printing it in the get servlet and get all servlet? Because that makes my job much easier. Any one of you want to take a guess? So it may not be correct. Yes, that is one. I'm trying to reuse the code. And what other thing I was trying to do is, I'm trying to give a specific meaning to the package. This package contains servlets and they are responsible for what? Controlling. I don't want those servlets to do the job of printing. I don't want those servlets to, yeah, that is one thing. Yeah, I don't want to I don't want to use the same servlets for printing. I don't want to use the same servlets for printing, and I have written as he suggested, we can reuse this single record servlet and multi-record servlets in case if some other servlet want to print a single record, or some other servlet want to print a multiple records. One is reusing the output servlets, and other thing is, what is these servlets are inside a package called controller. So what do you mean by a controller? It controls the flow. It controls the flow. When user clicks on the submit button, it invokes a servlet. When user clicks on the submit button, it invokes a servlet. And the servlet is capturing the data from the HTML, or capturing the data sent by the client, and invoking the process. It is performing the process. It is processing the request. And when the request is processed, when the response is ready, it is instead of printing it, when the response is ready, instead of printing it, it's calling another servlet to print it. It's calling another servlet to print it. You observe, it is calling another servlet to print it, right? Whereas if you look at our previous example, I was using the same servlets to print the task. I was using the same servlet to print the output for us. Instead, now what I'm doing here, instead of using the same servlet to print, if you look, this is our last example, and there is no package called output. Whereas in this, I created a package called output. Then this output got servlets. They are responsible for printing, and servlets are also present in controller. Since they are in a controller package, they are only responsible for controlling the flow. It receives the request, it processes the request, and it sends the response to what? This output servlets. If it got a dynamic data, if it got a static data, HTMLs. It's only success message and failure message, right? When you insert a delete a record, what do you have? You either just need to say record deleted or record not deleted. So you are calling what? HTMLs. But when it comes to retrieving a record, you have to display the details of the employee, right, or details of the user. So what? When it failure, you are calling the failure.html. When it succeeded, you are calling a single record servlet to print the output. So this is simple actually. I didn't do anything logically or anything. It's only a concept wise. Instead of printing the output in the same servlet, I am using another servlet to print it. That's it. There is nothing beyond that. Now, what next? Right? So this program seems to be very clean. You have HTMLs. You have a connection package responsible for obtaining database connection. You have a DTO object, a user object, which can carry the data from one layer to another layer. When I say one layer to another layer, you put it in the HTML, and you capture the data in the servlet. If you look at this, you are capturing the data in the servlet, and after capturing the data, you are storing into a user object, and that user object you are passing it to the insert method of the DAO. So you are passing it, right? You are passing the data from one layer to another layer. Now insert servlet is a controller. Controller is one layer. And from this layer, you are passing it to DAO. DAO is your persistence layer. So with the help of DTO, you are passing the data from controller to persistence layer. With the help of DTO, you are passing the data from controller to persistence layer. Right? So that's the reason we call this user object as DTO. DTO stands for data transfer object. DTO stands for data transfer object. DAO stands for data access object. Your DAO is nothing but persistence layer. And with the help of data transfer object, you are transferring the data from controller to the persistence layer. And after that, when you say get servlet, you are also passing it to the output layer, presentation layer. So what do? You just get that attribute, right? User object, and you print it. Output package is responsible for what? Presentation. Output package is responsible for what? Presentation. So what do you do in the get servlet? In the get servlet, you pass a username to the get method, and that gives you back user object. That is, your user DAO is transferring the data in the form of user object to the controller, and that controller is again giving back to what? Again giving back to the output servlet. So the servlets in the controller package are controlling the flow of the application, whereas the servlets in the output package are purely responsible for printing. So if you can see here, you can see a design pattern called MVC, Model View Controller. You can see a design pattern called MVC, Model View Controller. The servlets in the output package are responsible for presentation. So we call them as a view, V-I-E-W. And servlets in the controller are only controlling the application. And in DTO, you got a data object which is carrying the data. And actually what are we trying to do? We are trying to insert, update, delete record, or get a record. Update, insert, update, delete, retry. So we are using all these operations on what? Data transfer object. That is your user.java object. So you have this is, and this is called as model. The user.java is called as a model. So you see a MVC architecture here, and your user DAO is your persistence layer. Is your persistence layer which is responsible for all database operations. So you can see MVC design pattern here. We'll talk about MVC design pattern more, but later, not now. So I solved the activity for you. Now I would like to discuss the activity to another level. What is that we're going to see now? If you remember, in the previous two examples, I was ignoring the image. In the previous two examples, I am ignoring the image. In the previous two examples, I am ignoring the image. But in this case, I don't want to ignore the image. In this case, I don't want to ignore the image. Now I pick an image from here. I have images on a desktop. Oh, but how this happened? It says task successful. So that means does it indicate that the image is also uploaded? Does it indicate that image is also uploaded? How do we upload images first? How do we upload images? So we will do one small example, then I'll come back to that activity again. If you look at this, there is a form. I want you guys to observe this form. Can you tell me what is the difference you see in this form comparing it to the previous forms? Do people see anything different in this form comparing it to your previous forms? Or you guys don't observe any change? Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. Now what is this? Because now you are trying to upload an image. You're trying to upload an image. You're trying to upload an image to a server, or you're trying to upload a file to a server. You're trying to upload a file to a server. So since you want to upload a file to a server, you have to use this encryption type. That is, it has to send the data from client to the server, right? When you click on the submit button, it has to send the data from client to the server. But how to carry the data from client to the server? How to carry the data from client to the server? That is something which is important. Yeah. How to carry the data from client to the server, right? So you are telling the encryption type standard how to carry the data. So you have a lot of options here. Now this is one of the options, and this option is used whenever you want to upload a file. It can be any upload, it can be any file. If you want to upload any file, you use this encryption type and they use the method attribute post. With the help of get, you won't be able to upload a file. With the help of get, you won't be able to upload a file. So you need a post, and you also need to specify how to encrypt the data and send it from client to the server. Send it from client to the server. And it is an input field, but it's not a text field. It's not a text field. It needs to be what? A browse button, right? It needs to be a browse button. Right click, run as, run on server. It needs to be a browse button. Right. It needs to be a browse button. Yeah, I'm browsing an image. Any image I can browse. Now when I click on the submit button, what should happen? Right. I'm just printing, I'm just displaying that image on the browser. I'm just displaying the image on the browser. So whatever the image the client is sending, the server is reading that image and presenting it back to the browser. Let's see how this happened. So you have observed the changes need to be done to this HTML. You have observed the changes need to be done to the HTML in case if you want to upload an image, in case if you want to upload a file. And there is one more thing also. You will have a lib folder. In the lib folder, you are adding 2 extra jar files. Focus on the 2 I selected, not on the last one. There are 2 extra jar files I added. Commons-file upload, commons-io. Now these are the 2 jar files provided by Apache Software Foundation. These are the 2 jar files open source provided by Apache Software Foundation. And I will be making use of this jar files, and these jar files help me in reading the data sent by the client. These jar files helps me in reading the data sent by the client, because now you are not sending the data normally, you are sending the data encrypted in some particular format and giving it to me. So in order to read the data, I need to make use of what? These 2 extra jar files provided by Apache Software Foundation. Now you're going to see what I'm going to do on a servlet. Observe carefully. Now in the servlet, I'm just using this to see some extra class names or interface names, whatever you say. You have a file item for file upload. You have a file upload exception from file upload, disk file item factory from file upload, and servlet file upload from file upload. And you are overriding a do post method, and in this do post method you are creating an object for disk file item factory. It's a class, and you are also creating an object for servlet file upload. And the servlet file upload constructor is accepting disk file item factory as an argument. These two tabs, these two lines are very crucial for this application. Disk file item factory. Now, what do you mean by this disk file item factory is this is responsible to read the input from the HTML. And normally input from the HTML is read using a request object, right? How do you read the input from the HTML on a servlet? With the help of request objects. So you create a disk file item factory and you created a servlet file upload, and look at this line, servlet file upload dot parse the request and request. That is, you are parsing the request object with the help of servlet file upload. And with the help of servlet file upload, you are parsing the request object, and when you parse the request object, it returns a list of all the form elements. It returns a list of all the form elements. How many elements are there inside a form? There is only one element. So there are two elements. One is your submit button, and other one is a input field. So it returns a list for you. Now I will be iterating over that list. I'm iterating over the list. And what I'm doing here is I am saying fi.get. fi.get. I'm saying what? fi.get. Now what do you mean by fi.get? It gives you the content of the image. When you say fi.get, fi is your file item. So as I said, no, when I say parse request, you are parsing the request object. And when you parse the request object, whatever the elements you have in the form, all those elements will be returned in the form of the list. And you are iterating over the list, and you are getting those content of the image by calling on the method get on a file item. Now that gives me what? Byte array. When you say fi.get, it gives me what? Byte array. Observe carefully here. The get method will give you byte array. Now, is it a character data or is it a binary data? Is it a character data or is it a binary data? It's no longer character data. If you remember all your previous examples, you did response.getWriter.println. Oh, it's simple. Copy and throw it into the lib folder. I will be helping you with the jar files. You just need to paste it into the lib folder. I'm sorry. How to add jar files was the question, and I just add those jar files into the lib folder by pasting them. You can do the right click and paste it into this lib folder. You can do the right click and simply say paste, and I'll be helping you with the jar files, or you can also download it from the internet. Coming back to this, when I say fi.get, it returns me a byte array. So I know there are two types of strings. One is a binary stream and character stream. And in the last three classes, I was talking about the character stream. So I was using print writer out equal to response.getWriter, and I was saying out.println. But for the first time, I'm coming across a binary data. I'm coming across a binary data, and I cannot print binary data with the help of print writer. I cannot print binary data with the help of print writer. So what I'm doing here, instead of saying response.getWriter, I'm saying response.getOutputStream. Instead of saying response.getWriter, I'm saying response.getOutputStream. I'm saying response.getOutputStream. And that gives you what? Servlet output stream object. That gives you what? Servlet output stream object. And with the help of that servlet output stream, see, when you say response.getWriter, it gives you print writer object. But when you say response.getOutputStream, it gives you servlet output stream object. And with the help of that servlet output stream object, you are calling the write method to write the data to the browser. You are calling the write method to write the data to the browser. That's what happened. The image was printed on the that any question on the snippet, or is it simple? Any question on the snippet, or is it simple? So you need to add those two jar files, and you just need to create object of the disk file at some factory and associate with the servlet file upload object. Then with the help of servlet file upload object, you call the path method to pass the request object, and that returns all those items, all the items in the form, all the input elements of the form. When there is only one input element there, and you just say get to get the byte, get the contents of the file in the form of bytes, and you are passing it to the write method of the servlet output stream. Now what is this servlet output stream? So you use print writer for character mode. So when you have a binary mode, you need to use servlet output stream. But how do I obtain servlet output stream? On the response, when I say get output stream, that gives me a servlet output stream. Then I use it to print it. You're gonna see that. You're gonna see in the next example. It's not that okay. Since I have only a binary data. If you observe, there is only one input field which is accepting what? Which is accepting a binary data. Now, in case if you have a combination of binary data as well as character data, what we're gonna do? We're gonna see that. But encryption type is, it will have a different way of sending the data to the browser. When you use encryption type multi-part/form-data, you have a different way of sending the data. That is, your HTTP protocol uses a different standard, uses a different way of sending the data to the browser. Yes, perfect. Your answer, you are correct here. What is this has next? In case if you have more elements. In case if you have more elements here. If I have only one element. It's a list, right? When you say parts, it is returning a list. If you say parts, it is returning a list. So the list may have many items, may not have many items. But in this case, the list got only one item. In this case, the list got only one item. So you're just saying directly get on it. So just directly calling get on it. Oh, here we are not having has next because I'm using a for each loop. I'm using a for each loop. So because of that reason, yeah, I'll do that. In this case, you are not having has next method. The reason for not having has next method is you are using for each loop. If you use iterator, then you need to have a has next method. Let me write that snippet quickly. I'm sorry. Look at this. If you have something like an iterator, then you'll be saying iterator dot next only. Then again you need a servlet output stream. Yeah, we use servlet output stream because you have a binary data. We use servlet output stream because we have a binary data. Yeah, the encryption type can be used for all, it is regarding the Ishta's question. The encryption type can be used for all form of elements. I'll demonstrate in the next example. I hope the questions regarding the servlet output stream is clear here. So this is how you see the output. Now, let me go back to our example where we were doing the CRUD operations, where I was ignoring the image for the last two examples. Now in this case I won't be doing that. Look at this insert.html here. Okay, and it connects to insert servlet, and you have a method attribute as a post and encryption type multi-part / form hyphen data. Multi-part / form hyphen data. And if you see, there is only one image field. There is only one image field, or there is only one file one file. The rest of them are what? The rest of them are text fields only. Now how do I manage here? Java resources, src, controller, insert servlet. I have a disk file item factory and a servlet file upload. Then here we go. You call the part method to pass the request object. Then the request object will return a list, and you are using again for each loop, and you get one item at a time from the list. It is a list of items, fi is 1. So at a given point of time you get one element. So you are checking, is that field name first name? If you remember, for every input field I am taking a name attribute. For every input field I am taking a name attribute. So I am comparing here. Is the field name equals first name? Then get the value entered into the text field. This is how I am capturing it. Normally what we do, if it is not a encryption type multi-part form data, we say request.get parameter first name, request.get parameter last name, request.get parameter username. But since you are doing encryption type multi-part / form data, and you also have to upload a file, so what I am doing here, then I am comparing it and I am doing this stuff. And this is where you need to focus. The rest of them is very simple. You check the field name. If the field name equals matches, if the field name matches, then you are calling the getString method to get the value. But this is something you need to focus here. fi.getFieldName equals photo. When it is photo, you cannot say getString. See, for all other things like first name, last name, you can simply say getString. But when it is a photo, you cannot say getString because it's an image, it's a file. So observe here what I'm doing. File equal to new file. I'm creating a new file. There is a location on the server. C drive users Arun desktop images. In that I'm creating a new file. And with the help of file item, guys observe here, you have a fi. Fi is your file item. You are calling a write method. So you have this utility function. The write method writes the content of fi to the file specified as argument. So the argument is representing a file, and into that file you are writing the content of the file item. If you remember last example, you said fi.get. It gives you the byte array, and you are printing that byte array with the help of servlet output string. But what I want to do now, I want to upload an image, right? I want to upload the image onto the server. So normally what they do is they don't store images onto the database. If you remember that it's the table creation, if you remember a table creation, I created a table called user, but what is the photo? I'm not using blob data type. Normally to store images, we use a data type called blob, B-L-O-B, B for Bombay, B-L-O-B, blob, binary large object. But I'm not using the blob data type to store the data into the, to store the file into the database. Because I don't want to store files into the database. That is not a good practice. So I'm using varchar. Now that varchar is here, I'm assigning to photo what? I'm assigning the address. So when I upload a file, I'm storing that file onto the computer. When the client is uploading a file, he uploads the file onto the server, and I'm storing that address into the database. This address will be stored into DB. So instead of storing the image on a database, if I want to store the image into a database, the data type should be blob. Or if I want to store any other file, it should be clob, C-L-O-B, character large object. But I'm not using blob, I'm not using clob, because I'm not storing image onto the server. Instead, I'm storing the address of the image onto the server. If you might have observed, last time I uploaded my image here. So see, I delete this, I go back and I say insert.html, run on server. Okay, let me delete record. I can create one more. So if there was no image, I stored an image here. So it is stored onto the server. Now what I'll be doing next is this snippet clear, or you have any questions? You just need to understand the snippet, because the rest of the things is easy. Yeah, I hope Ishita and you are clear about this, right? This is what the question you asked. In case, can I use encryption type for text fields also? Yes, you can do that. And this is how you read it when you do that. Actually, it's not on a desktop. Actually, it is a server address. Normally, where do you deploy this project? You deploy the project onto the server, right? So you give a server location. Now for me, the client is my machine, my server is also my machine. But actually that will not be the right thing, right? Client and server will be two different machines. So client is something, people across the globe are the clients. People across the globe will be the clients, and server is the application where I deploy. So when people across the globe, when they browse their image and click on the submit button, they store it onto the server. because it is not recommended to store images or files, uploaded files or uploaded images onto the database, because reading from a database and writing into a database is a very costly process. So what they do is they store the images or they store the uploaded files onto the server, and their addresses will be stored into the respective databases. Yeah, I will be able to access the photo because I will be accessing the photo from the server. I will be accessing the photo from a server. I will be able to do that. See, you upload your image, right? If you take Facebook example, what you do, Facebook or anything, you just upload the images. And you upload it from one computer. It doesn't mean that you can see the image only from that computer. You go anywhere and you access it. Here it will be the server address. Whatever the address, here I am creating a file, right? This is the address on the server where I am creating a file. And this is the address on the server which I am storing into a database. So next time when I want to present the data, I will be using that address to present the data. Now you look at this example. I say get all servlet. Now into the get all servlet I added one thing. What is that you see? Get all, or you say single record only. Look at this. Observe. What I am doing here? Out.println image src equal to user.getPhoto. Which address it will give you? It will give me the address on the server. It will give me the address on the server. And when I run this application, let me do that. Run on server, the user ID. Well, how this is possible? Because here you specified it. So when you try to get a record, it will not give you the image. Rather, it will give you the address where the image is stored on the server. It will give you the address where the image is stored on the server. Then you give it to the source attribute. You give it to the source attribute, and that displays the image for you. It's not only for this, there are multiple records also. Let me run this. Get all.html. No image found. No image found. Image is found. Because there is only one image here. For the rest of the things there is no image. Is it clear now? Or you still have a question on this? Yeah. Any other questions? So you know how to store a record, or you know how to upload a file, you know how to retrieve the record, and you know also how to retrieve the uploaded file. You know how to retrieve the uploaded file. So with this, I'm done with the servlets concept. Actually, I'm done with the servlets concept in the last class itself. I just did one activity where I demonstrated the significance of the post, and I also demonstrated the encryption type attribute significance, when we use method equal to post, and when we use encryption type attribute as value as multi-part / form data, then how do we read the data on the server? So I'm hoping that you guys have no other question about it. Yeah. So let me move on to the JSP. Let me move on to the JSP. Again, for JSP also, to learn JSP, the best link to follow is this. This guy has written amazingly about this servlets and JSP. You have a servlet, you also have a JSP. When you just go through all these things, and I'm sure you will be able to answer any question with respect to servlet and JSP. Just go to the tutorials of servlet and JSP of this guy, javatcoin.com. He covered everything for intermediate level, high level, and even any interview question will be coming out of this thing. So now we learned JS servlets, right? So what is servlet? A web component. Now what is JSP? A web component. Then the immediate question which strikes your mind is, why do I need both web components? Why do I need a servlet, a web component? When I already have servlet as a web component, then what is the need to have JSP as a web component? This is a common question everybody gets, right? When you are reading something, when you are reading more than one thing for doing the same job. Servlet for designing a web component, JSP for designing a web component. Of course, automatically question comes in each and every mind. Why do I need both? And when I know servlet, why should I learn JSP? So let's write the demerits of the servlets. The demerits of the servlets is it's uneasy, or you can say not user friendly to write HTML inside servlets. Who will be comfortable in writing the servlet, in writing HTML in a double quotes? If you look at this, within the servlets, you are using the HTML. I was using only BR tag, and for me, writing the break tag in the HTML in the servlet itself is a pain. But do you think will you be able to write all this? Will you be able to write? I'm sorry. Will you be able to write all this HTML inside a servlet? You're going to do it happily. You're going to do it with a comfort, putting all this HTML inside a servlet page. Nobody will be comfortable in doing that. Nobody will be comfortable in doing that. Nobody will be comfortable in doing that. So it's uneasy or not user friendly to write HTML inside servlets. Next thing, it's binding the job of designer and programmer. Job of designer, that is the people who develop HTML and CSS content, and the programmer, the Java programmer, they are binded. It's binding the job of the designer, the HTML and CSS developer, and the programmer together. So what happens? More time involved in development, as one person responsible for both the jobs. And you know, it is very difficult for somebody being a Java programmer and asking him to write HTML and CSS and work on the attributes, color attribute, font height attribute, font width attribute, font family attribute, font height attribute. I'm doing Java from long, 6 years or 7 years. Right? Now if somebody asks me, hey, why don't you manage your own HTML? I won't be able to do it because I get frustrated to manipulate those attributes because I'm not friendly with them, right? I never use them. So somebody asking me, hey, because you develop servlets and since you have to write HTML inside a servlet, so it will be better because a HTML person cannot write a servlet, whereas a servlet person can write HTML also. If somebody asks me, because you are developing a web page using a servlet, why don't you write your own HTML? I can write very basic things, but I cannot do this amount of work. I cannot do this amount of work on a servlet. You think I'm going to manage all this stuff? I won't be able to do it. And my productivity decreases. My productivity decreases. This is the problem with your servlets. This is a problem with your servlets. So they introduced JSP. JSP stands for Java Server Pages. How this is different? It stands for Java Server Pages. You write Java inside HTML. Right? Focus here. In the servlets, you write HTML inside a Java. Now here you write Java inside HTML. You write Java inside HTML using tags or using special tags. It's much user friendly. It's much user friendly. When I say user, the programmer friendly, right? Because that why I said user friendly or programmer friendly, because it will not combine. It segregates the role of designer and programmer. Right? The HTML guy can develop the HTML pages without being dependent on me. The HTML guy can develop the HTML pages without being dependent on me. And once he completes those HTML pages, right? Once HTML pages are developed, I will inject Java code into them, into JSP, using special tags. So see, if both are working independently, they work better. I will inject Java code into JSP using special tags. So nobody is dependent on each other. He is a HTML expert. So he is a HTML expert. So he can do the HTML very quickly and very efficiently. So once he is done with his HTML pages, I know where I have to introduce my Java snippet. So I'll introduce my Java snippet using the special tags inside the HTML document. And that makes JSP more popular than servlets. That makes JSPs more popular than servlets. So now, would you recommend replacing servlets with JSPs or no? Now, after reading this or after learning this, what do you suggest? Would you recommend replacing the servlets with JSPs or no? The answer is a very simple one. Either it's yes or no. Yes. Okay. Now, then since you guys said yes, so tell me, I have two packages. One is a controller package, other one is an output package. I show you this one, insert servlet. Now, insert servlet, do you see any print writer, println? Do you see any out dot println here? No. Let's go to the delete servlet. Do you see any out dot println here? No. Let's go to the get servlet. No. Get all servlet? No. So you have servlets inside a controller. You have servlets inside a controller, but there is no print statement there. There is no print statement. Now you have servlets inside a output package. You have servlets inside a output package. Now in this I have print statements. Now tell me, do you recommend JSPs for all servlets, or do you recommend JSPs for only servlets in the output package and not for the servlets in the controller? What do you suggest? Do you want me to replace all the servlets with JSPs, or do you want me to replace only those servlets from the output package with the JSPs, or you also want me to replace the servlet from the controller with the JSPs? Perfect. Only the servlets in the output package. But that is not the reason. I'll tell you the reason for that. So far we discussed the demerits of servlets and merits of JSPs, right? Now let me write the demerits of, demerits of servlets. Sorry, demerits of JSP. Every JSP page gets converted to servlets before request processing. Before it completes the user request, every JSP need to get converted into servlet. So every time you make a request, to the JSP page, or every time you request a JSP page, your JSP page will check for the existing object. I mean, as I said, a JSP page gets converted into servlet, right? Every JSP page gets converted into servlet before request processing. So you know the servlet life cycle. What is your servlet life cycle? You make a request, you request a web page, or you request a servlet. The first thing we do is we check whether the servlet object exists or not. If servlet object exists, then request is treated as a thread, and servlet object processes the request, and when the response is ready, we give it back to the client. And in case if the object is not found, when you make a request, if the servlet object is not found, then servlet class is loaded, then servlet object is created, and then request is processed. So this is your servlet lifecycle. But in JSP, there is an additional stage. A JSP gets converted into a servlet. A JSP gets converted into servlet before it starts the request process. So what happens? So what is the drawback of this? Why I'm calling it as a demerit if it is getting converted into a servlet? So it is slow in comparison to what? In comparison to your servlet. Your JSP is slow in comparison to your servlet. But there is an advantage of JSPs. You can develop JSPs very effectively, but not servlets. But there is a drawback. Your servlet is quicker, your JSP is slow. Your merits of servlet. Your servlet is quick in request processing because there is no translation involved. Whereas your JSP is slow in request processing because it gets converted into servlet. Why it is slow? Because there is a translation needed. There is a translation needed. So, so the statement is JSPs are not replacement for servlets, because the drawback of servlet is the merit of the demerit of the servlet is the merit of the JSP, and merit of the servlet is the demerit of the JSP. The JSPs are not replacement for servlets. So we use servlets for controller, and we use JSPs for output, because presentation is important. Though they are slow, we still use JSPs for presentation, and we use controllers for request processing, because servlets are good in request processing, so we still use servlets for controlling. Servlets are poor in presentation, so instead of servlets we use JSPs for presentation. So the assumption of servlets or JSPs replacing the servlets is false. So there is a drawback, and there is a merit and demerits. The merit of servlet is a demerit of a JSP, and demerit of the servlet is the merit of a JSP. So we use them together. For outputs we use JSPs. For controllers we use servlets. So let's see first JSP. We have something called as a JSP tags. JSP tags are classified into following. Here we go. We have directives. We have scripting, and we have actions. So JSP tags are classified into following: directives, scripting, and actions. Now these directives are again classified into page directive, include directive, taglib directive. Now the scriptings are again classified into following: scriptlet, expression, declaration. Now you have actions. JSP colon use bean, JSP colon get property, JSP colon set property, JSP colon forward, JSP colon forward, JSP colon param, JSP colon plugin, JSP colon fallback. These are with respect to JSP 2.5 or 2, I think. So there are more actually, but these are the very basic things. Use bean, get property, set property, forward, param, plugin, fallback. So we will be discussing each one of them. Right. Now normally inside if you want to import, what will you do? If you want to write an import statement, what will you do? Right. You write inside a Java program, this is how you do it. Okay, import java.util.array list. This is how you import. But in a JSP, that's not going to work. This is how it's going to work. Now if you have multiple imports, what are you going to do? You can do this. If you have multiple imports, you can do this, or else you can also do it like this. And it's not only that, there are a lot of other things. Page is a tag, and we have something like what we say content type. So normally, how do you achieve this inside a servlet? Inside a servlet, you do this. Whereas if it is a JSP, this is how you achieve it. Then what else? Then yeah, you have a lot of other options too. You saw import attribute, you saw content attribute. So if you pick this page direct view, you'll have many attributes actually. We saw import, we saw content type. Then we have a lot of other options. Right? We're gonna come across these things later. We'll be discussing these things. Now tag lib. Now what is this tag lib is? So not tag lib, but include. The content of another file can be included into the current file. So what is the significance of this is content of another file can be included into current file. So you don't need to rewrite. The other file content can be included into this with the help of this. I'll come back to the tag lib later. Let's see the scriptlet. These are all local variables here. Can declare variables. Can write snippets, but not methods and classes. You can declare variables, you can write snippets, but not methods and classes. So you can write your Java code here. You write your if block, else block, for each loop, all the stuff you can do it here. Now in case if you want to print something, what will you do? In case if you want to print something, you need to do this. Out.println hello. Suppose you have a variable here. I said you can declare variables. Now I am doing here. Now you want to print this fellow name. This is what the syntax, right? Now what I can do is, that's it. The name gets printed. The name gets printed. Now what is this declaration says? You can declare variables and you can define methods. And here are not local variables. When I say local variables, the variables inside a method, the variables inside a if block, the variables inside a loop, they are local variables. But if you write something inside a declaration stack, they are not local variables. They are your class variables. They are your instance variables. But if you put something in this, they are local variables. So a very basic introduction of the JSP tags. Now you will be discussing more about the JSP tags with the examples. So you have this photo example, right? Crude operations underscore photo, new, dynamic web project. When I say crude operations underscore photo underscore JSP. The same example I'm going to do with the JSP. Just stay focused here. I just go and dump it. It's done. You just need to stay focused here because I'll let you know how do we do it. Guys, remember this. You got this output servlet, right? There's a package for servlets and I'm calling the package as output. I'm deleting that. I no longer need them because I'm going to use JSP. Now from the controller, look at this. I'm calling what? Single record servlet.jsp or whatever the name you want to give it. Or you can say single record.jsp and here multi-record.jsp. Single record.jsp, multi-record.jsp. Now you got this web content where you have HTML files. There I am creating JSP file. First let me create this. Single record.jsp. You observe here your page directive, the page directive, it takes an attribute called language. So you're telling that in this JSP file, I'm going to use Java language. And here is the content type. And this is the encoding standard. Now I have a body. Now within the body, I'm putting a scriptlets. Then I can write the code as it is I have in the examples. Observe here. Oh man, I made a blood. Okay, I think I'm correct. I'm doing that. I just copy the piece of code. And I put it here. That's it. The job is done. I just need to have this import statement for user. Look at this. Line number 1. Then it says out is a duplicate variable. Look at this. Out is a duplicate variable, it says. You don't need to write print writer out equal to response.getWriter. Out is an implicit object. Now you need to understand what do you mean by implicit object. So you don't need to externally create that object. It is available by default. So you have some list of implicit objects. You have some list of implicit objects. There are 9 implicit objects over here. There are 9 implicit objects here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know out. print writer out equal to response dot get writer. But you don't need to do that here. It's available by default. You have request, you have response, you have config, you have application, you have session. You have 9 implicit objects. But what is the scope of these objects? Right? Out is an implicit object. In total, we have 9 implicit objects. We're going to discuss the significance of each. And what is the scope of those objects? And scope of those objects is within scriptlets and expressions. That is, you can use those 9 implicit objects within this or within the expression. I cannot use it in the declaration. The 9 implicit objects are not applicable for declaration. They are only applicable, they are only available in the expression, and they are available in the scripting. That's the reason I was able to use it here. So what do you think? Is JSP is easier or it's difficult? I just copied the snippet from the servlet into the JSP. I didn't do anything beyond that. So seems to be simpler, right? Yeah. So same thing, I have a different way of doing it. This is very important. I was using the complete scriptlet, right? And within this I am writing everything. But this is not recommended. This is not recommended. Then how do I do that? Look at this. Other way of accessing data. If you focus here, so this is much user friendly, right? First name, last name. Similarly, you can print the other information. Similarly, you can print the other information. Let me run this. It's get.html. Run on server. So it is calling a JSP file, single record.jsp, because your get servlet is not printing. Your get servlet is not responsible for printing. It is, okay. This is a different program. Because your get servlet is not printing now. It is calling a JSP file, and JSP file is responsible for printing. Oh, Raman. there is other set of data, right? The other way of accessing the data. In a JSP file. Now there is another way also. Look at the other way. JSP colon use being ID equal to user. Why user? I'll let you know. In the get servlet, what is the attribute name? What is alias name? User. So I use user here. Then it was stored under which scope? It was stored under request scope. You did request dot set attribute. And it is of what class? It's of the class DTO dot user. So you are trying to retrieve it using tag based syntax. This is there is another way of accessing the data, and is the correct way, because they wanna keep Java away from the JSP tags, because it's a JSP file, so it should appear everything is a tag based. So when somebody, it is not recommended to write Java inside this HTML. It is not recommended to use Java inside HTML. Not recommended to use Java. Use tag based syntax. I'm using a tag based syntax, so I don't need to say now here the way I wrote request.get attribute. Here also I did request.get attribute. I don't need to do all this stuff now. I can happily use this syntax. And how do I print the properties? Simple. Look at it. JSP colon get property. Which property you want to print? First name. Of which object you want to print? User of. JSP colon get property. Which property you want to print? Last name. Of which object? User. It's done. Go back and refresh. You see here another way of accessing the data. first name and the last name. So this is the efficient way of accessing the data. So it's completely, your Java is completely, it's not existing in JSP now. You have only tag based syntaxes to represent Java. JSP colon use bean and set property and get property. Now this is I did for single record servlet, but what I'll be doing for multi-record. Let me create a JSP. Multi-record JSP. And I do the same thing, I just go to the multi-record servlet, pick up the code, and put it inside this scriptlet. As I said earlier, there are some implicit objects, we don't need to do that. Import user and also import array list. It's done. Say get all servlet. I'm gonna call get all.html. You get all the records. Now, in case I don't want to use Java inside, this. We can say tag based syntax. Look at this. JSP colon using, what is your ID? Users list equals dot get attribute. Users list. Which scope? You store in request scope. By default, everything will be in page scope. Then you page scope in the sense current page. Then you have request scope and session scope. Then which class? Java.util.array list. Then how do I print this now? Now I am left with no other option. Use scriptlet. Use scriptlet. Sorry. For each loop first. Now convert it. And the rest is same. You can, yeah. But it's new. Here I need to change because you cannot have duplicate variables. Done. You don't need to reset everything. You just need to refresh it, and you see plenty of because tag based syntax, and you see again displaying the record being displayed. But because in order to use for loop, again you are using a scriptlet, right? Again to use for loop, we are using scriptlets. To use for loop, we are using scriptlets. So we have one more stuff called JSTL. Okay, fine. I'll discuss that tomorrow. It's already too late for you guys. Any questions on what we covered so far? Or is all good? Alright, okay, if you guys have no questions, I would like to stop here and we'll catch you in the next session. And in the next session, I'm going to talk about JSTL, more about JSP tags. And once this is done, I'll also speak about Ajax. This is the agenda for the next class. Alright. Yes. Alright guys, okay. If you have no questions, we'll catch you in the next class. Thanks everybody. See you in the next day. Bye-bye.